Gaikwad. Okay, friends, we welcome you all in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to NMBF Coffee Chats on this very important session, Rape and Violence, a Christian Response. Today, we have with us Dr. Jamila Koshy, who will be speaking on this topic, and she'll be speaking for a length of time, and after that, we will go into the Q&A. For those of us who are here for the first time, you could be in touch with us. We'll be putting some of our contact details in the break before the Q&A, right? So just a bit of an introduction about Dr. Jamila Koshy. Dr. Jamila Koshy is a psychiatrist by practice. She is graduated from the Armed Forces Medical College, AFMC, Pune, and completed her postgraduate in psychological medicine from the University of Bombay. She has served in the Indian Army. Jamila has contributed to many books and journals. The books Side by Side, Saya Express, Talking Families, Should I Care, and Public Theology Exploring Expressions of the Christian Faith are part of the initiative in group writing on issues of contemporary concern. Yeah, so with that, I want to welcome Dr. Jamila Koshy to lead us in this session. Welcome, Dr. Jamila.
Thank you, Pastor Abhijit. And yes, this is really a very important issue. And I guess every time something big like this happens, the whole country is stirred up, and we all start thinking about it, and it becomes an issue for some time. And then sadly, the whole thing peters out and dies. And we've seen this happening again and again. And of course, the the biggest protest before this was the Nirbhaya protests, right? Which most of us would remember from 2012. And I remember then I was probably a lot more involved in the protests and in the whole thing because it was one of the big rapes that had happened. Before that, I don't know how many of you all would remember, but when I was young, there was this rape and murder of two school children in Delhi, Geeta and Sanjay Chopra, by two men called Billa and Ranga. In those days, there was no internet, there was no there was no social media, there was just the news, there was the newspapers and all that. But with those limitations, the rape and murder of Geeta and her brother Sanjay became a big thing. And that was when it was talked about. And, there was a whole lot of discussion and ferment and protests and stuff that happened. And actually, a lot of things actually did happen in those days. There were laws passed, there were all those things that happened. But at the same time, what we need to realize is that actually on the ground, has anything really changed? We don't really know, right? Because rapes have continued and violence has continued, and it has been more or less unabated. And the statistics on this are pretty horrific. And let me just put that up and just have a look at the statistics of what rape and violence is like in India. It's pretty shocking, really, and yes, I hope the screen is visible.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, now these are the statistics from the National Crime Records Bureau. So this is a government platform. They are not likely to exaggerate anything. If anything, they would underplay things a little bit. So 4.5 lakh crimes against women happen every year. These are the 2022 statistics which have come out. 4.5 lakh crimes every year in a nation of a billion. We might think that's not very much, only 4.5 lakhs out of a billion. But this includes cruelty, kidnapping, and assault. Okay. Of these, 31,516 are completed rapes, which means there is about roughly 80, per day, and every 20 minutes, one woman is raped. Now, what we need to understand is that these are only the recorded rapes. And the the ratio of recorded rapes to unrecorded rapes is again horrific. Okay. Most women do not record the rapes. Most rapes happening in the home, for instance, are never reported. The rapes happening against children, sexual assault of children, again, a study done by the Women and Child Ministry showed that 1 in 2 children has recorded some form of violence, and 1 in 5 had recorded some form of sexual violence. So if you can imagine the number of rapes which are happening in the country, it is absolutely scary. Now, I'm going to focus mostly on rape, but also in connection with it, the other whole aspect of violence, because rape is actually a violent crime. It's not so much a sexual crime as a crime of violence and a crime of showing control and dominance and anger. Okay, that's the sort of crime it actually is. It interlinks with violence a whole lot. So it's also interesting to know that the number of murders that happen every year, this is number of murders. Again, that's 78 per day, almost 30,000 in a year in the whole country. And these are, again, the recorded rapes, murders. I suppose there would be not so much chance to not record the murder. So probably this might be a fairly accurate picture. Now, 70% of the victims are male. But what we need to realize is that 7.5:1 is the ratio of men to women perpetrators in the US. In India, there are no statistics of what the perpetrators are like. So we know that the bulk of perpetrators of violent crimes tend to be men, particularly in India. So violent crime, murders, rape, these are all so normalized in our country that it requires something exceptionally brutal for us to wake up out of our lethargy. We need to realize this, that we have got so desensitized to violence. It happens every day on the paper. After the news of the Kolkata rape, you might have noticed, some of you may have seen the the way people have collected other data of rape. There was one page with about 9 rapes in UP in just that same period. Okay, and that was just normalized, just ignored and passed over. This particular rape has aroused the conscience of the nation because it was particularly brutal, yes, also because it was a middle class Hindu girl. So it woke the conscience of the majority population of our country, for whom the middle class Hindu Indian is, in a sense, the most vocal, the most independent of that they are the people who can sort of speak up most with the maximum freedom. Assaults on Dalits, for instance, are plentiful. Many of the rapes that happen are on the lower class women, on Dalits. They're not able to speak up quite as much. So those rapes, those murders don't get quite as much traction as this particular rape has got. And we need to understand this. It's not that I am not sympathetic to this girl. It's not that our heart is not broken by what happened to her, but we need to realize that this is one out of many that happen. It just happened to be a person who is in the limelight, a doctor, an educated girl. And so the educated class of India, which is the class that speaks up, was able to take this as something that happened to one of us. It could have been me, that sort of feeling. Okay, having taken this, having noted this, having this caveat in mind, let's go ahead and try to understand why this is happening. Why are there so many rapes of women and children by men? Okay, we need to again understand that, again, it is basically men who are raping women, and we need to accept this without seeing it as an accusation against men, or that I am anti-men or anybody's anti-men or anything like that. It's nothing like that. It is just something that we need to accept, that it is men largely who are raping, and we need to understand why. What is driving them? Why is this happening? Only when we understand can we get anywhere close to stopping it, preventing it, or doing anything about it. Okay, so we're going to look at the biology, the sociology, the psychology, and then the theological aspects of it. Okay, so let's go to the biology. Now, when I was reading up about this, okay, of course, I knew roughly what I was going to say, but I just wanted some information about the animal models. And when I did that, I actually was a little stunned because the number of animal models where there is aggressive sex by males against females is pretty horrific. Okay. And if you read about it, you'll see there are insects, there are primates, there are dolphins who we love. We love bottlenose dolphins. All of us would have enjoyed seeing pictures and videos of dolphins, where dolphin males can be aggressive and sexually harass females into sex. Okay. Snakes do it, birds do it. Well, that's the sad part, isn't it? And actually, as I was reading that, I was asking the Lord that, Lord, did you create them this way? Or is this an aberration which happened after the fall? Just like, meat eating, tigers attacking deer. Is that part of what your creation was like, or has this happened after the fall? We tend to believe that it was after the fall because God may have possibly intended vegetarianism earlier. We do not know, all right? But in any case, this is the scary part, that animals do this, and apparently humans also do it, all right? The good part is that there are animal models where there is courtship rituals rather than forced aggressive sex. There are courtship rituals. There are birds, for instance, which have all these elaborate displays, which sometimes we laugh at and find cute and funny. The male bird will display its plumage, or it'll have some kind of a call or whatever, and then the female sort of has the liberty to choose which partner she wants to mate with. All right, so there are animal models, remember this, and we are animals, we are from the animal kingdom. There is some kind of this part is there. The role of hormones has been debated a lot. Okay. So, for instance, we know, of course, that men have testosterone largely. Women also have testosterone, and women tend to have estrogen mostly. Men also have a little bit of it. So, but the point is that the role of testosterone is still being debated. It's not as clear as all that. It's not that testosterone causes men to rape. Okay. That is not the way it is. There is no such thing. But there is a weak link between testosterone and the need for social dominance. All right. So, there is this weak link. So there is some possibility that there is some role of testosterone here, but the role is largely debated. Okay, coming to the limbic system, I've drawn a picture of the limbic system over there for us to understand. This is what we call the lizard brain. Okay, this is the most primitive part of our brains, which in a sense animals share. So lizards would have this. Other animals would have large limbic systems. They are the place where the primitive part of our drives are stored. All right. So every organism, we are also organisms. Every animal, we are also animals, have the need for food, water, air to breathe, a place to sleep, and also sex. All right. So these are all drives that we have. Now, these are to a large extent instinctual and driven by the limbic system. Okay. So if a dog sees food, it does not stop for anything. It just goes and gobbles up the food. If the dog wants to pee, it will, if you train a dog, of course, it may be able to signal to you that I want to go out and pee. So, it would do that. But otherwise, in nature, an animal just drops its feces or its pee or whatever anytime it does. It's just an instinctual thing which happens. So similarly, sex is one of the instinctual drives. So if an animal smells the pheromones or whatever, it will instinctively feel the need to copulate, and this will happen. Now, in a sense, humans also share that. We have a limbic system as well. So we have instinctual sexual drives. However, in human beings, there is a prefrontal cortex, and this is this part of the brain. Okay, the frontal cortex, the part of the brain in front, all this area. This is what is well developed in humans. It is the thinking part of our brain. It is a part of our brain which controls our instinctual responses. It's a part of our brain which has morality, which has logic, which has reasoning, which thinks and plans and controls its desires, okay, which regulates its desires. Now, the problem is that the frontal cortex sometimes can be overruled. And one of the times when it is overruled is when there is an excess of alcohol in the system. Okay, so alcohol dulls the frontal response. It dulls it dulls it in an acute fashion, and also with this chronic intake of alcohol, the frontal cortex doesn't function as well as before. Which is why you might find that people who are drinking, even in an acute setup, or chronic alcoholics, would behave in a very disinhibited way. They would say things that normally they wouldn't say. They would do things that they would normally not do. They might be a little loose, or they might be a little suggestive, or they might be a little violent, or they may be a little crude, or whatever. And unfortunately, there is a strong role of alcohol in rapes, sexual violence, and all these other things. And a source that I just saw today said that this Kolkata rape accused, Sanjay Roy, he had visited a red light area and he had been drunk. He's a chronic alcoholic. He had been drinking many times, and he drank alcohol before committing the crime. Right? So we know that this is part of the whole problem that happened that day. Now, what about the role of age? We know that the frontal cortex continues to develop till the person is at least 24 or 25, which is why young people do not have as much control over their instinctual drives, over their spontaneous desires, over their moods, over anything. Young adolescents, they are thinking people, they are intelligent people, but their control over their moods and drives and all that is not as strong as adults. Which is why sometimes it has been found that when young people are involved in violent crimes, they can be very disinhibited and uncontrolled. For instance, I remember that in the Nirbhaya case, the juvenile who was involved, there was one juvenile, there was one young, below 18 person. He was just going to be 18 in a couple of days. That boy was the one who was most violent. And I remember reading that he was vicious with that girl, and he harmed her, and he was the one who thrust a metal rod into her, and he screamed, "Die, die." Okay, so he was vicious and unable to control his anger at the girls fighting back and rejecting them. Right? So this is the role of age. These are all the biological reasons. We need to understand that these things are also part of the whole sexual thing. It's not that they can't be controlled. Okay, all of them can be controlled, but they are things that we need to accept and then control. Coming to sociology, there is a strong role of patriarchy here, right? Now, the very benign definition of patriarchy is that it's a system of governance or society in which the father or the eldest male is the head of the family and descent is reckoned through the male line. So this is a very benign definition of patriarchy. And in its softest form, it's just that, the father is the head of the house. This is the soft form of it. But then, actually speaking, the extent of patriarchal systems can be much, much more than that benign definition. Because the whole system is based on the concept that men are the rulers, men are made to rule, that men are the unquestioned leaders of society, that women cannot even aspire to be there, that men are actually in some form more competent, more more able to lead, that they are stronger, braver, more intelligent, used to be said earlier. Okay, and so it's based on this whole unequal definitions of the genders. And therefore, social, political, and religious rule belongs to older men. This is the whole theory on which patriarchy is based. So it is characterized by this male dominance, which is there in public and private spheres. So decision making is made by men. They decide what is to be bought, what is to be done, what are the rules for society, where women can go, where women cannot go, what they are to wear, what they can do, which jobs they can take part in. This is all patriarchy, all right? And you remember that right now we think that everything is equal and nice, but up to 50, maybe 100 years ago, women were not allowed to do anything. They were not allowed to sign legal documents. They could not inherit property. They were not counted as citizens. They were not counted for quorum. Okay, they could not go to medical school. They could not study what they wanted. There was a lot of limitations on what women could do or say or wear, or what they could do or go, or anything. It was as if they were some kind of lesser humans. Now, to some extent, this has changed. And of course, we thank God that when India was declared its independence, that in the constitution, we declared that men and women are equal citizens. And that was thanks to Ambedkar and Nehru and people like that, that we had this very progressive idea that no, men and women are equal. They're all going to be equal citizens. And many countries in, in the West, which are supposedly more developed, had not yet embraced that idea fully. But then there are still all these limitations, and there are double standards for women and men in so many things. So women are objectified, women are told what they should do, they're controlled at home. This is very much part of the patriarchal system in India. And we all know that. Women have a curfew, they are regulated on what they can do and where, they are discouraged from taking up certain professions, or they are, they're told that they cannot own property. The property is always given to the brothers. So there is a whole network of all this going on. And it is this thinking that women are unequal which contributes to this whole idea that men are special, women are not special. And we know that in India, boys are desired. Girl children are aborted. They are selectively removed as fetuses from the womb. And if they are born, they are allowed to die at higher rates than boys. And all these things are realities in our country. Now, Christians may not actively do it, but we know that the child sex ratio is low even in children, in Christians, which means that some amount of female infanticide is happening even among Christians. We are selectively trying to have boys rather than girls. So this whole hierarchy of the genders, and not just genders, even other men. So there is a hierarchy. The older men, the upper class men, the wealthier men, they are on top of the hierarchy, and then there are other people below them. So it's all a very power structure, all right? And the higher ranking males have more wealth, power, status, all these things. And in India, again, there is an intersection with caste. Okay, so the fairer you are, the more supposedly Aryan features you have, the more your caste is Brahminical or whatever. There is this caste hierarchy which interlinks. So the Dalit is below the others, and the Dalit woman is the least of all. Okay, and this is the whole fight for that. Dalit feminists have been speaking about that this is how it is happening. And we saw a pretty horrible expression of this when in Bombay there was a protest against the same Kolkata rape. It was organized by the residents of the Hirnandani complex, and apparently some women from a slum nearby wanted to take part in the protest. But when they came, they were not allowed to join. They were asked to leave because they said, this protest is not for you, it is for us. Okay, so, but then they said that, look, we are being raped more. We know what this safety issue is. We know that there is violence against us. We want to be part of it. But they were not allowed to be part of it because apparently caste. Okay, and that is the horrible reality of India today. That's a horrible reality, that there is this ranking and hierarchy of men, women, caste, class, money. And along with that, there is the whole acceptance of violence. So patriarchy tends to breed violence because it's all about power and control in its worst forms, of course. I'm not talking about just the softer part, but there is this huge acceptance of violence as well. Violence is used as a tool to keep the lower castes and the women and even the children in control. So we accept this. We do not question it. The whole idea, for instance, that parents have the right to beat up their children, where does that come from? It is a very patriarchal notion, right? Like, that we should continue to use a lot of violence to keep people under control. And as Christians, we need to rethink this. Okay, coming to the psychology. Okay, so I want to quickly talk about the psychology of what happens in rape. And I'm going to look at it from these 3-4 ways. So one way is the very Freudian way, where you have these 3 parts of our mind, which is called the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is one's basic instinctual drives, all right, what is basically mediated via the limbic system. Now, the id drives are controlled by what we call the superego, which is the religious or the parental voice inside us, which tells us that this is good, this is bad, don't do this, you can do this, so that is our sort of like a conscience. Okay, it is our parental or religious training, which becomes our superego. And the ego, the one in the middle, is the one that balances out all this. It's the executive part of us. Now, sometimes what happens is if we are functioning merely on one's id drives, if you are functioning merely on one's instincts, here's a woman, I want this woman, I can go and take her. Okay. I don't care what morality comes in. I don't care that she's not giving me consent. I don't care about anything. I want to do it. I'm going to do it. So there is this just functioning on your instinctual drives for power, control, sex, whatever. Okay. So there is no control of the ego or the superego, particularly superego, because as Christians, we know that our superego would tell us that, no, this is wrong. You cannot do it. You need to be kind. You should, shun violence. You should look after the poor and the weak and the vulnerable and, all that. Okay, that's one thing. Another way of looking at it is by looking at our thought systems. What happens to our thoughts if we are accepting rape and violence? It is because we are believing a lot of this this comes under sociology as well, the whole bit about rape cultures. Now we start believing this, okay? Now, I've put here, the whole idea of what happens in a rape culture. In a rape culture, it starts with language which is demeaning to certain people, okay? It could include sexual jokes, okay? And this is very common, right? In every WhatsApp group, in every class group, in every professional group, you'll have people making these sexist jokes. They'll put up pictures of women in something, or they'll make some jokes, which mostly it is directed against women, against their wives, against, against something like that, sometimes against gays or whatever. So there is a general dislike of anything which is not the male standard, okay, the cis male. It's against that. So these kind of jokes and language, that's where it starts from. So you just start saying things about women. Oh, women are like this, women are like that, or this guy's gay, or this guy looks like that, or he looks so feminine. So you start just talking about this. Then it goes to the whole stereotyping. So women should be like this, should be like that. Look at her, she's so butch. This one's a bitch. This one's done this. This kind of sort of stereotyping, okay? So women are supposed to be gentle or soft, or that one is very bossy, this one. So this kind of traditional roles and stereotypes, this is also included. Now then the next thing is, if you don't fit into that, I have the right to verbally abuse you. I have the right to call you promiscuous. I have the right to say anything. And again, the Nirbhaya case brought this out completely. All right. Nirbhaya, that girl, Jyoti Singh, she did not fit into the gender-based stereotype which these guys had. Those 6 or 7 guys, they were looking for a girl to pick up, and they saw this girl with her fiance late at night. They had seen a movie, and they were getting into this bus to go home. So the very idea that a girl can be out with a boy at night, they started making, trashy comments about her, suggesting that she was promiscuous, she was sexually loose, and things like that. Whereas she was an educated medical professional, all right, and she had broken their stereotype. She wasn't behaving the way she was supposed to. Good girls are supposed to be at home by 9 o'clock. What are you doing out at 9:30 and 10 with a boy? So they felt they had the freedom to abuse her, to call her names, to suggest that she was loose, to suggest that she was not a good woman or whatever. Whereas they were the guys who were roaming around in a bus, and they had just robbed a carpenter and let him off. Okay. So they were the ones looking for a woman to pick up to rape. And at the same time, they have no compunction about, applying a stereotype to this educated girl, because she's not fitting in with their stereotype, and she's not fitting in with their idea of how a girl should behave. And then, of course, because the boy resisted, he objected to what they were saying about his fiancée. They beat him up, thrashed him, and then, of course, they decided to sexually take turns to rape this girl, and they were angry with her for not allowing them, and they became very violent, and of course it ended with her dying, right? So this is how a rape culture works in stages. Now, if you start believing all this, if you start embracing these ideas instead of questioning them, that's when it happens. And enfolded into that is all this idea of entitlement and male privilege. That because I'm a man, I can roam around at 9 o'clock at night. There's nothing wrong with that. Because I'm a man, I can demand that this girl should accept my teasing or joking or whatever it is. Because I'm a man, I have the right to evaluate the girls in my class. I remember this in my own very good medical college. At the back of the classroom, there was a list. And that list included all of us 20 girls, and we had been ranked on apparently our sexual performance or how we were going to be sexually. Now, these are all people who are going to be doctors, respected doctors. And they had the male privilege of writing that on the desk, putting the girls' names down and ranking them sexually. That this girl is like this girl is like this, okay? This girl is sexy, this girl is something, whatever, all right? And then this whole acceptance of violence, that if you don't listen to me, I have the right to do whatever I want to you. The whole idea of consent is completely missing. The whole idea that a woman has a right to reject a guy if she doesn't want him, or choose a guy if she wants him and be out with him at 9 o'clock at night, that is missing. And then if you're rejected by somebody, the generalization that all women are like this, all women are like that, using bad terms like bitch or whatever for the women. So this kind of generalization also happens. If you look at it from the relationship side, many of these guys who are prone to rape or whatever have very limited interaction, friendship, or understanding of women. Some of them may be very much part of this bro culture, bonding, male bonding sort of thing. That is their only place. Okay, that is their only friendship. They do not have any mixed groups. They do not have any women who they can call a friend. They are not very close with their sisters or whatever. Women are only seen as mothers or goddesses or as the other. So this woman who doesn't fit into my stereotype, who is not the ideal woman sitting at home and cooking or doing whatever, she's being at home at 9 o'clock, she's the other. So she's a seductress, she's evil, she's not fitting into my stereotype. I have the right to do what I want with her. Okay. If you look at it from the conditioning point of view, there is also the role of watching violence in movies or in real life. And I need to say here again that this Kolkata guy, he had a lot of violence in his life. Okay, he had already run through 4 wives and he had been violent with many of them. They had left him and gone because of the violence in his life. So watching or seeing or contributing to real life violence or to movie violence, particularly pornographic violence, can decondition us. It can make us desensitized to any kind of violence, and it leads to any lack of empathy. You don't feel that what you're doing is wrong or what is happening is wrong or this, So this unfortunate normalization of violence is very scary. And what was really shocking was that this is something which we are not noticing or realizing. Apparently, the most searched for word in the porn sites has been this girl's name, the Kolkata doctor's name, because somebody let out the name by mistake and they have been searching for her name to see whether anybody has uploaded a video of hers, of her rape or whatever. And that is shocking that so many people want to see this. And they are desensitizing themselves. They don't seem to have any empathy or anything with what happened. So there is a group of people who are protesting, but there is also the underbelly of a lot of people for whom this has been normalized. Okay, having looked at the sociology, having looked at the biology, and having looked at the psychology, let's go to the theology of this. Okay, what is that? How do Christians see this? Now, Christians need to see God's original plan for the genders from Genesis 1 and 2. Okay, and from Genesis 1, what we read is that God created human beings in 2 sexes. He created them male and female in the image of God, and both of them were made in the image of God. We know that, right? In Genesis 2, we read that God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will create a helper suitable for him. And we know that the word helper that is used is the same word that is used for God as helper. So we have Psalm 46, in which we say that God is my refuge. God is my helper. Okay? God is my strength. God is a very present help in trouble. So God as helper and the woman as helper. There is no inferiority here. There is no hierarchy here. Both have been created in the image of God. Both have been created to have stewardship over the earth, because in Genesis 1 it says, let them rule over the birds of the air and the fish of the sea, etc., etc. So what do we see in Genesis 1 and 2? We see equality, both made in the image of God. We see friendship. She was made to be a companion because it was not good for the man to be alone. We see romance because when Adam sees Eve, he starts this poetry, right? He says, "Here now is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man." So there's this whole romance idea. And there is love, right? Because the whole idea was that they are to love each other. And so the man and the woman, the man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh. And this was the whole idea, that you're going to have equality, harmony, friendship, romance, love, and a permanent sexual monogamy. This was God's original plan for marriage. Now, there are some more things which we can get from the Song of Songs, and I suggest you read it sometime. And when we read the Song of Songs, we see that it is completely mutually consensual, right? There is no question of any force there. It is consensual. Both the man and the woman are happy and delighted in their relationship. Both of them initiate the relationship and both of them are satisfied in the relationship. So this is the kind of pattern that God intended for sex. He didn't intend it to be anything like what we are seeing in rape and violence. Now, briefly, what is God's plan for violence per se? Okay. Now, if you look at Genesis 1, and it says that God wanted human beings to exercise stewardship over the earth. Stewardship is taking care, right? You are ruling like God rules. How did God rule? God didn't rule by killing off things. God didn't rule by destroying things. God ruled by creating beautifully and making it lovely and looking at it and delighting it and saying it was good. This is what God wanted us to do. Where's the place for violence there? In Matthew 5, we read about how blessed are the peacemakers. And that is what God intended us to do in the fallen world. And Isaiah 11 talks about how they shall not kill or destroy on my holy mountain. It talks about how the wolf will lie down with the lamb and the lion will eat grass and things like that. So there seems to be a complete reversal of this violent thing. Okay. And that answers my question, which I said in the beginning, that did God create the animals which sexually harass the female for sex? I don't think so. I think that is an aberration that happened after the fall, because God didn't intend violence, and in the world to come, there is not going to be any violence. Therefore, we need to, as Christians, shun violence a lot more, and we need to talk about it a lot more. The violence and the sexual problems that we are seeing are a result of the fall from Genesis 3. Okay, it is not God's ideal plan. It is completely setting back the idea of equality, harmony, friendship, romance, love, and permanent sexual monogamy, which is all the antithesis of rape and violence. Okay, but then can the church actually speak into this situation? And I think that this is going to be a little uncomfortable, this slide and what I'm going to say here, because I think that we need to first self-introspect before we speak into the situation. It's because I think that what we want sexual violence to stop, and we want rape to stop, and we want a little bit of the violence to stop. But we are not understanding that the underpinnings of this, which is the patriarchy, the unequal relationship of men and women, the entitlement and male privilege which we have allowed, the whole idea that men can decide for women and men are the decision makers in church, home, and society, which the church, unfortunately, we have been allowing this. We have justified it through scripture. The thing is that because of the fall, a lot of things came into the Bible which were not ideal, right? So we have, for instance, in the world, which not ideal. For instance, we just talked about it. We have the sexual aggression by animals. We have violence of different sorts. We have poverty. We have war. We have divorce. We have all these things. But then we know that what God's original intention was, the pre-fall Edenic idea. And we know what God's final plan is going to be. We have enough clues for that in Revelation and in the passages, prophetic passages in Isaiah and elsewhere. So there is this theme of gender equality which is running through scripture. There is it's there in Eden. It's there in the in the prophecies of the future. And it's also there in the middle, because we have breakthrough examples even in the patriarchal world that the Old Testament was set in. We still have women who are doing things, who are equal, who are used by God, who are prophets, who are queens, who are who are doing things for God, who are contributing in many ways. We have the whole idea of all people being sinners and Jesus redeeming all of us. We have the Spirit given to all of us. We have gifts of the Spirit given to all of us. All this shows the equality. But there are a few passages which, yes, suggest male superordination. But the problem is that I notice that alternate interpretations of these passages are completely resisted by people in the church, often by men, sometimes by women as well. Because we have bought into this idea that no, there is gender equality is only to a certain level and not always. There is got to be this this domination of men in church, home, and society. Until we transit from this, I don't think we can fully speak into the whole rape situation, into the whole violence situation. Violence as well. Has the church shown a complete, consistent attitude to violence? Have we eschewed and shunned violence consistently? Or have we sometimes backed violence? Have we excused violence? We need to think about this, okay? But once we do that, how should the church react? How should Christians react? I think we have to role model and teach gender equality from the base. Till we do that, everything else that we do is just like a band-aid for an abscess, which is how I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. When you have an abscess, you have to drain it. You have to remove the pus from inside. If you just put a band-aid on top, it's not going to heal it. It's just going to do a little bit. You'll feel a little better for some time, then again the pus will form. So until you actually teach this gender equality, that men and women are equal, we're created equal, unless you teach respect for both the sexes, unless you teach this healthy sexuality, which is a loving sexuality, a consensual, completely consensual, that means both are giving their consent every time, whether you're married or not married. And it has to be mutually satisfying, and it has to be sacrificial, and it has to be exclusive, just one man and one woman, and it has to be permanent. None of this is what rape is. Rape is not loving, it's not consensual, it's not mutually satisfying, it's not sacrificial, it's not exclusive, it's not permanent. Okay, so rape is completely the opposite. We need to teach this to our young people, that there's no question of any kind of violence, any kind of forced sex, any kind of one person getting satisfaction and the other not, or me being selfish about it, or having another partner, or easily just quickly going in for a divorce, whatever. None of this is what we need to teach. We need to teach our young people this. We also need to teach and think about our role as peacemakers, as builders of communities, and eschewing violence. And particularly, we need to talk to our young boys and men about this, okay? The role of violence, the role of gender equality, and the role of healthy sexuality. There have been lots of attempts done to teach this to young people, particularly in Africa. And this has met with a fair amount of success. When young boys in schools and in colleges are taught, these are two various programs which have done, No Means No and Men with Conscience. When young men and boys are taught this, it's not always been the church, NGOs, whatever. When they are taught the role of violence, okay, to shun violence, but to also use a certain amount of defensive and protective violence if others are raping or being violent to women or children or whatever. To teach gender equality, that we need to respect women. We are not trying to count off our sexual conquests. Okay, that's not healthy sexuality. To be chaste, to be to be sacrificial, to be loving, consensual, always, every time consent. Okay, this sort of thing. We have to teach this to young boys and men, and then this is preventive. And then, of course, we need to work with victims, which has been talked about enough, so I'm not going to talk about it here. And one thing which we have always not been able to do globally is working with perpetrators. It's very difficult to work with perpetrators. And we as a church perhaps need to start doing this. So these are just some ideas which I had and some thoughts. Okay, it's not a comprehensive look at rape and violence, but just some ideas, because it's something which we all feel about deeply. All of us, I'm sure, have been jarred out of our complacency or our, thinking that, okay, whatever. This would have hurt a lot of people. So because you're all thinking about it, I'm so happy about that. Women, of course, think about this a great deal because we have to constantly be aware that we are not safe. Okay. The whole idea that something can happen to us is something which we are taught at a very early age. Actively, despite Reclaim the Night was a program which the women of Calcutta did. It's an old program which was meant to emphasize that, look, women can be anywhere, anytime. We are full human beings with the right to exist, with the right to be anywhere, to the right to walk on the streets even at dead of night. We should be safe. Nobody has a right to touch us. So we need to give this kind of confidence to our girls, and at the same time, to help them to find ways to negotiate the sometimes unsafe world that they are in without limiting them. And that is my hope and prayer, that we will be able to do this, to teach our girls confidence and assertiveness, and at the same time to teach our boys to be different, to be people like Jesus was, okay, to love and respect and have friends among women, to change the mindset which limits and stereotypes and laughs at or abuses women in any form, to get over all that, to have a strong superego, to have a strong conscience, so that we are able to get over that instinctual desire for control or sex or whatever, okay, and to control and limit all these things. We need to work with our boys and young men. I hope that many, many people would find this a calling, and in their churches, in your churches, and in other places, find ways to talk about this. Men need to talk about it more than women. Your voices will be heard by men more than our voices will be heard. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share. And I will stop here and leave the time open for questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Jamila, for that very in-depth and well-rounded presentation. For those of us who are online, please stay there. We will be cutting this live stream so that it becomes one complete block, and then we'll soon be starting